I'll introduce Gavin Wade, who's an artist, curator and director of Eastside Projects, and I'll let you explain what you're going to talk about anyway. Yes, okay. And then I'll introduce you shortly.
Great, thanks Kieran.
I'm just going to dip the light.
Go for it. The world is understood through stories. All meaning comes to us as narrative. We can take control of these stories to create our own meaning and form new myths. Fragments of stories and half-remembered truths form constantly rewritten histories and articulate new and possible futures. Stay in the EU. Make all schools art schools. Create a universal income, for God's sake. Support the welfare of all. Make all homes affordable. Read these words aloud in public. Shout them. Whisper them. Upcycle them. Upcycle this book. My new book, I brought a couple of copies with me, £16, just in case. I'm doing the book launch tomorrow in Birmingham. We've done one in Denmark. I've still got to do one in Holland. We'll do one in London, probably in the autumn as well. I'm going to show you or read through or look at my own text and think, what was I writing a little bit here? That's the front cover. The back cover I quite like as well. Don't make art by yourself. Make it with others, from others, for others. Take it and make it better. And then it's got 20 years of artist curating embedded into this book. So I've called myself an artist curator since '96. So I'm just into that 20th year of thinking that. And still sometimes I'll meet someone and they say, what do you do? And I say, I'm an artist curator. And they'll say, wow, you're the first person I've ever met who's actually said that's what they do. So even 20 years later, and we know it as a term, but it still isn't a given. It still isn't a normal, it still isn't an average, it still isn't a standard approach. Weirdly, I don't know why, I think it should be. And so there's things in the book that are partly about that, I suppose, in a way, and the different possibilities of curating. And I think that that is vast. It's a vast field. Art is vast. I think art is actually life. I don't think there is life without art. I think it is that fundamental. And I think we have got to a position where we forget that. We know it in our bodies and what we do in the world, but we don't always think about it. I've made an artwork here using words to try and propose how to rethink my city, how to revive Birmingham. The title comes from a text in The Economist magazine, which is entitled How to Kill a City. And it tells the story of how Birmingham, very prosperous after the Second World War, growing and beginning to compete with London, expanded beyond 1.1 million people, business is booming, but the North and Wales are not. And Birmingham was sacrificed after the Second World War. Government policy was put in place to reduce the population of Birmingham. The population was forcefully reduced down to 900,000. Business licenses were stopped, were revoked, were taken away. The ability for Birmingham to be able to grow was neutered by government policy. And not a lot of people in Birmingham know that. And that affects the psychology of my city. So how do you revive it? What else can you do? How can you rethink it? This was partly from an invitation to do a TEDx talk along the theme of throwing caution to the wind. And I thought, well, if I'm really going to do that, then I'm going to relook at Birmingham's budget. So I'll run through a little bit of this, but I'm not going to read it, perform it to you, but hopefully we'll pull out a few key bits. Actually, that's quite a good screen. I can read it on there. So I'll hit you with a few little things. So our slogan recently has been that Eastside Projects makes art public. We now call ourselves an artist-run multiverse. We think that this now is a more appropriate term than an artist-run space. We do many things, and some of them contradict each other. That we have different realities within our organisation. There is me as a director. I have 5 other company directors who we set up the space together in 2008. And so they tell different stories than I do. We don't all tell the same story. So we begin to acknowledge these differences. At the end of the way we've been describing what we do over the last probably 5 years, I think, we use this phrase that we're going to demonstrate ways in which art may be useful as part of society. In some way, I think that this text, the performance of this text, the reading of it, the discussion of it, is being useful in society. We support other artists in the city. We put a lot of energy into talent development in the city. And we were doing that from 2008, prior to talent development being a thing that gets embedded into an Arts Council agenda. We did it because we thought it was needed in our city, and we needed a club and a hub and a place for artists to get together. And we tried to provide that. And then we discovered that technically we are actually called the supporters of Birmingham. So imagine you walk around the city, every street sign in the city has an artist on it. That's my city. So the coat of arms of Birmingham, which you see at the top there, has 2 figures on it, and they are called the supporters of Birmingham. One is an artist and one is an engineer. When we realised that, it was actually James Langdon, one of my co-directors. He's a graphic designer. He designed the page that you're looking at. He designed this book. We've collaborated together for 12 years now. He pointed it out and said, we need to tell a new story about Birmingham. So we made a children's book that's called The Artist and the Engineer, and it tells a new story of Birmingham. If you look through this bit here, you'll see that there are the 2 figures, the artist and the engineer, and they have, maybe it's the next page, so there is a hammer as well. The hammer we see as a representation of the power and the might of the city. So you have supporters, but then you actually have the administration of the city. And you have a motto. And the motto that the children's book really in here is to describe a new way of thinking of our city. And the artist and the engineer get together, they rethink about the way the city is being built, that we knock down a library and build a new one, then we knock down another one and build a new one. And that is because we think the city is programmed by this coat of arms with the word forward. And that if forward, and it's used in a slightly, like it could be progress or onward, it could be any other word in a way, which is a slightly fake utopian vision. We think we should get rid of the word forward and that we should replace it. And then what would you replace your motto of the city with if you, we're going to think about it a little bit more, what would change that? And we applied an ethos and an approach to thinking about exhibition making in Eastside Projects, which is layered. And we propose in this book that the city should change its motto. So a very tiny little gesture in a way, a 1-word alteration to our city, which we think might change everything. So, and there's been a lot of interesting things that have come out of that for us, a lot of things to think about and have led to next stages. But we think really that culture is not something separate and that art is not something separate. It is in the layers of a city. It should be in the thinking of our city. And that's a key thing that I want to come back to, hopefully, a few times through showing you through a few different ways of imagining reality through our multiverse. So this one is storytelling, I suppose. If I tell you that in this story our city is going to change and that we're thinking about the future and we can't wait for forever, we need to do something now. So I'm proposing that the city should become a city of 1,000 artworks. And then I'm adopting some of the city council's language and approach, because some of that works, some of it doesn't work very well, but some of it, there's already a huge infrastructure in place that delivers some of making the city a fair city, making it a prosperous city, making it a democratic city. So these big generalizations, but actually they begin to break down in the departments in the way of thinking about how you organize a city. So I proposed 3 new directorates within the city: an art and people directorate, an art and place directorate, and an art and economy directorate. So that there is no separation. There is no art directorate. There is only art directorates, because art is not disconnected from any of these things. You cannot disconnect art from place or economy or people. It is intrinsic to all of those things. All of those things rely on art, not the other way around. So I decided to look at the budget. The budget of Birmingham is 3.264 billion. It was in 2014 and 15, and you can see how it's broken down into the three different directorates. And you can see some details of the schools benefits or housing revenue account. Out of that, currently it reckons in the budget that £40 million is spent on culture in Birmingham. Sounds like quite a lot. Doesn't sound like just throwaway, but most of that is probably taken up with the museum, the symphony hall, the ballet, and a few other key, quite traditional institutions along that way. And if you look at it as that it's just 1.2% of Birmingham's budget, and how well is Birmingham doing on the world scale of culture and art production? Is it, is it in the top 10? Is it in the top 100? Is it in the top 1,000 of cities around the world? I don't think it's high enough. I don't think it's testing itself enough. It's struggling to deal with the problems that it's created by being a badly run city, and that the council is being attacked and being opposite to the government. So every time over the last 15 years that the government's been in power, Birmingham City Council has been the opposite party. Things like that don't always work out very well. So Birmingham goes against the grain, but it doesn't help itself. And that's, historically, that has happened also. So 1% does not make a difference. And I propose really that I think to make a difference and to completely transform our city, we should spend 10% of the budget on art. And that would change everything. 1% keeps the status quo. 10% pushes it over the edge. I'm excited about going over that edge. And I think it would completely test the possibilities of where art can be involved and how. And it would push it to some limits. There's some places where artists don't want to be, and curators may not want to be in charge of, or connected to, and supporting. But I think it would reveal this idea of a layered city. It would bring out the layering. So we would spend 326 million per year. We'd spend 3.26 billion over 10 years as a new transformation management of our city, the city of 1,000 artworks. And that I believe that the world would pay attention if a city decided to do that. And attention can be converted into many useful things. Could all go pear-shaped as well, it's very true. But it could lead to many things. So in this text, I've run through a 5-act structure, and I got to a bit here at the end where I have a prompt to myself to read faster, and that this triggers things and further investment in HS2 Railway, which is of course already done deal now. That's all go. There's a HS2 Academy being built. I'm commissioning the £2 million artwork for the front of HS2. It's all of these things are all agreements are all in place. The Queen signed it all off. The powers that be, it's done. It's happening. There's buildings with 10,000 people working on bits of HS2 in our city. And how do we wield that power? How do we connect to it in some way? It's really difficult. Very complex system that's going on there. I bend to perhaps another sort of status quo element. The thing I came up with there was that there could be a biennale, in a way, a Birmingham biennale type structure would have to come into place to use and some of that budget in a particular way, but that would have a big impact. And it would attract artists in a way, to create a new movement of artists to a city that will spend the most money on culture and art in the world. I think people would move if you did that. It would lead to days where you do look at the challenges that Birmingham has made in the past. In 1791, when Birmingham was challenging the government and trying to destabilise the system that was limiting what Birmingham could do, the government arranged riots to happen in Birmingham, the priestly riots, and they attacked the intellectual centre and powerhouse of the Lunar Society within Birmingham. There are these moments where Birmingham has stood up and it's a genuine threat and it's knocked down. Sort of interesting position. That should be celebrated when Birmingham is an art city. Every billboard in the city is only covered with art. There is no other advertising. No other advertising, not because it's a rule or a policy not to have advertising, because all the advertisers know that it just would be negative promotion for them to do a standard sort of advertisement within the art city. It would change their behaviour. They wouldn't be able to operate in the way that they have already been doing. New housing would be developed. Artists would come and design and build artist housing and live in it. And this would also attract creative people to the city. The school curriculum is only an art curriculum. The same way as the structure of the city, it is only art and science, art and geography, art and language, art and economics, programming art, the art of life and death. Everything, every subject can be art. There should not be a separate art class. There should only be art and everything else. I want to do art and maths. I want to do art and technical drawing. I don't want to do art that's drawing. I just want to do art and that uses the skills of technical drawing to achieve art. This is where the separation of art is a lie, to try and take people's power away from them. That's why it's happened in schools. That's why it's happening now, because it is all about power. And to take it away is one of the simplest ways to take power away from the people. So by 2020, business, government and local council spending in Birmingham per head is the highest in the UK. By 2025, it is the highest in the world. All stories will be about us. That's an interesting idea. How many stories can you create by a huge act, whether it's an act of sacrifice or whether it's an act of investment? Do you not think so far ahead? Because I've been thinking about forever. This is what the city should be thinking about. How far ahead is it really planning? And is it genuinely believing in itself? Enough to make changes now to get there. I predicted 1,000th artwork, perhaps, and it was from two artists who influenced me a lot, artists who are based in New York, Arakawa and Gins. They tried to develop a procedural architecture as their artwork, an architecture that would teach you not to die. It would move your body around in such a way that your body would no longer be able to die. They think that the procedure of how we move around is what allows us to die in the end. And so they had this slogan that we have decided not to die. And I thought that that would be a good slogan to adopt in the city of 1,000 artworks. Over the last 10 years, both Arakawa and Gins have both died, sadly, inevitably. But they sort of fought it until the end, and they've made amazing ideas, and I think it's about passing those on into the future. Would anyone like to ask some questions about that section? Yeah?
So it's very idealistic and very utopian.
Is it?
It kind of sits in the art world. I'm just wondering, when you said it's all about power and power being taken away and there shouldn't be any separation, how involved in the city's actual political life are you? And have you ever considered standing for a position where you could actually then start doing and implementing and taking power and doing those things? Or is it not true that there is no separation, that actually you want to keep the separation and this exists in the art world and not in the real world?
No, I want to be involved in it and I want to change it, but as an artist curator. So I think it's possible. I mean, from this then, I've been involved in conversations with the leader of Birmingham that came out of the Artist and the Engineer publication, which led to, I mean, in some way, commissioning the biggest artwork in the city is one of the things. So it's obviously given to an area of expertise, which is logical in some ways. And then I've been consulting on the strategies, cultural strategy and public art strategies within the city. I haven't been consulting on non-art strategies. That's the next step. That's what I would like to do. So we're looking at how to do that, but I'm not interested in becoming a politician. So it may not be possible, because how do you enter into that system when you don't believe in the system? So, yeah.
Precisely that
Cool.
reason that there shouldn't be a separation. And I question anybody that says there should be separation but then refuses to dirty themselves with politics, as if it's
I'm getting quite dirty. Yeah, I don't think it's about the dirty. I think it's, I suppose it's a long term. What I would like to do, I think there'll be people who would be better than me, and I want to try and find them and work with them and support them to achieve that as well. Because I think it's going to take hundreds of those people, to be the artist curator within this situation. But it's definitely something I'm interested in. Yeah. Right, I'll move on. The world is understood through display. All meaning comes to us as exhibition. We can upcycle previous exhibitions to create our own meaning and form new displays. Fragments of exhibitions and half-remembered gestures form constantly reimagined environments and test new and possible futures. So I'm going to do a quick thing here, that just because at the heart of everything that I do is just to test something and try something out and re-look at something, not always towards a political end per se. The political end in some way sometimes is a afterthought or a realization. It may not always be the thing that's the catalyst for where something is going. The catalyst may be the relationship with another artist and coming up with a solution for something. So I'm going to start with, I think this is 2010, possibly 11, and it's the solo exhibition by Carey Young. And I'm going to present commissioning a new film by Carey here, and she wants to show other video works. And myself and Celine Condarelli, who is one of the other directors who founded Eastside Projects with me, we wanted to design the exhibition space for her. We designed a small, medium and large, the little doorway over on the right next to my office, Pleasure Island, back on the right, is the large video space. So 3 video rooms, and we wanted to change the way that the gallery operated, so that you would walk in and you experience these different scales of video making. And that it would also be partly taking on this monumentalism that she was looking at, a sort of failed utopian form of art that's placed around a Soviet landscape and then gathered together to create something unusual, unexpected, unanticipated, a gathering and bringing together like a storage unit of all of the Soviet sculptures brought together in one place, and Carey wanted to make a film of that. So, but I'm not dwelling on the amazing elements of Carey's artworks or any of the other artists in here, but I'm going to just show you a little alteration. So we make these video rooms, and then that is an exhibition that lasts for 3 months. Like you can fall into a rhythm and a circuit, a cycle of doing things. And the next exhibition was going to be by Dan Graham. Now, Dan is an older pioneer of conceptual art and a hero of mine, and I wanted to connect with him. And Carey was also very interested in his work, been influenced by it, and was interested in the fact that he was the next artist. What I proposed to Dan was that we keep the same spaces, but we modify them for Dan. And he also is going to show video work, but he wants to show models for architecture as well, or models for structures that he creates art with. But to do that, I didn't want to then show his video on the inside in the darkened spaces. I wanted to show the video on the outside. And then what would we do to the space? And very simply, we just cut it open and use a trick, an approach by Gordon Matter Clark, who was a friend of Dan's, who Dan had written about in the 1970s and seen his experiences and seen how he'd cut into architecture. So use not one of Dan's ideas, but a contemporary of Dan to alter the space, and then convince Dan that that's a good idea. So, but luckily he said, I'm not very good at exhibition design. You tell me what you're going to do and I'll see if I like it or not. And he really liked it. So, but we do things like here, slice open the medium-sized video room to reveal a long-term artwork. So in Eastside Projects, there are short-term artworks, things come and go. There are long-term artworks, some that stay and become part of the space. And it's an open invitation to every artist to modify the space and modify us, modify our ways of working, so that we learn from artists all the time. And that means that something like Carey didn't want the marble column to be seen. She wanted it removed, and I said, no, it has to stay. I don't think you've got a good enough reason why it has to go. It's staying. But she built a wall in front of it. So straight away afterwards, I cut open the wall to reveal it again. So you have a different sort of internal politics going on. And it allows little moments like this, where you've got a video of a minor threat gig from the early 1980s cutting through into a model, and the skylight letting light down into the space. So this is really joyous activity for me, to make those small alterations, to reveal light, to use all the things that make exhibitions incredible, to try and take people around spaces and make surprises for them. And at that just at that time, and a little bit before, I was thinking about this wall, a photograph of a wall by Christopher Williams. It's the wall from the Vienna Secession, which is one of the oldest artist-run spaces in the world. And at the start, we called ourselves an artist-run space, and we thought we're a new artist-run space. And we tried to learn from artist-run spaces, museums, commercial galleries, all the different options and ways of making art, and try and take the good bits from all of them. So I saw this wall and realised it was from the Vienna Secession, and wondered what it would be like to use their wall. Could I borrow their wall from Vienna? So that, and I've convinced them to let me borrow a full set of the walls, and moved them over into the space. So Dan Graham's show finished, and the next exhibition was called Narrative Show. And we decided, well, those structures that we've built are still quite useful. Let's keep them and see what we can do with them next. But the walls from Vienna were on their way in the truck, and to make them stand up, you have to drill holes in the floor and put metal sockets into the floor, because these walls are only 5 centimetres wide, and they have nothing else holding them up except the floor. So all of the support is from the concrete floor and is pushed up into the poles. Started to drill holes in the floor and move walls around. And this is Narrative Show. The photographs that you're looking at are also one of the artworks of Eastside Projects, so they're taken from fixed positions. So since the gallery opened, we had 7 fixed positions around the gallery, and by Stuart Whipps, and he's photographed them always from those positions. In this exhibition, he only photographed from those positions. So there's no, you can't go, if someone's standing around the corner, so Dora Garcia's doing a performance around the corner, we don't have any documentation of it because she wasn't in view of the fixed position. So you have to imagine the other things operating around, but stories are being written, scripts are being made, puppet shows are being rehearsed, and lots of activities happening, silkscreen workshops are happening. So this is a live space, and we're making changes. This is the show. This is still the show. We decide we don't need that small video room in the way. It's sort of blocking the space. What do we do with it? Let's take it apart. We take it apart within one of the normal exhibition days, and we construct an element of the next show, because we realise that this is a live process, and William Popel is coming over from New York. He's going to make a new film in the local area in Digbeth, and he needs a set that's a soil pit that he can dig a hole in and bury someone inside it. So we start to construct his film set within Narrative Show, and then other people perform on it. So in that one before, Nathaniel Mellors is performing on it, with Gwendolyn Christie from Game of Thrones in the middle, and testing out another dancer coming in. So we have all these actors and rehearsals and trials of actors happening live within the exhibition space, and people and telling people what times those are happening, and people coming in and seeing those. And then the puppet show is finally finished. So the exhibition turns into a 5-act show. And at the end of the 5th act, the final puppet performance happens by Heather and Ivan Morrison. And we have this ongoing relationship with Heather and Ivan, so we've made a number of works over the years with them. And then Narrative Show finishes, and William Popel's show starts, because he's made the film during Narrative Show, and now it becomes a solo show. And the soil pit is changed to show you that something has happened, and that there's a new situation happening within that space. And the medium-sized video room, you move across the set, across films, and the medium-sized room was used as a bar to film some of the elements within, and then is used as a projection space to show the film that is partly filmed within that space, and partly filmed in local pubs as well. That's Popel in the middle, and Juno Projects either side and behind, who wrote the music with him for the film, and 2 local Birmingham actors who were involved in the process as well. So then what we're doing is, we're making exhibitions, we also make users manuals, and the users manuals are to show you how to use Eastside Projects. And we've made 6 different, this is draft 6 of the users manual. The one that you're looking at here is draft 4 and 5 combined. The blue bits are draft 5 printed over the top of draft 4. And here, the user's manual is a list of verbs, all the things that Eastside Projects does, including borrowing. So the idea of borrowing the mobile wall becomes part of our methodology, becomes part of our approach to thinking. We adopt that, and then what else can we borrow? How do we borrow as an artwork? And we explain what that is, but then there's a next stage. After borrowing, we start to realise we can not only just use the existing ones, but while we have them, we can take them apart, and we can reverse engineer them, work out how they were made. So we put in a new verb to reverse engineer, and we give a new explanation. and I decided I want to make my own versions of the mobile wall so we can send the ones back to Vienna and we're left with our own versions which have been made in Digbeth, and alter them slightly and use them in a slightly different way. And then they're used, the ones are being made and they're installed for painting show. So we make, if we're going to make painting show, if we're going to make narrative show, then the show must be narrative. If we're going to make painting show, then the show must be painting. How do you make an exhibition that is a painting? Which involves 30 artists. So here is our attempt to do that. I'm co-curating a painting show with Sophie von Hellemann, and we invite a number of artists, and some artists paint the walls. Sophie paints the back of my mobile walls. My mobile walls are a painting. And then we place other works by Ashley Bickerton or Hayley Tompkins, DJ Simpson, Richard Woods, Nicholas Party, who made the wall behind, Imran Qureshi's works over on the right. And this is one of my favourite shows in a way because of that layering, that intensity, and the stories being told through the different elements of the exhibition, and being able to invite quite willfully and just joyfully surprising, funny, odd, amazing little gems of paintings that explore what painting has been and can be, all within the same space together. That's the original Vienna Secession wall section before that was sent home, with all the Hobby Pop Museum artists who are connected with my co-curator, Sophie von Hellemann. And you see this allows you to not imagine that any element of our space pretends to be neutral at all. It does not pretend to be neutral, because there is no such thing as neutral. And so the white cube as a lie, the idea that it pretends to be neutral, we want to make sure that it doesn't look like we're lying to you at all. We're just saying this is what it is, and everything matters. Everything, the floor, the walls, the temperature of the room, everything matters. Anything that we can do in this space could be an artwork. If we're going to, the front door handle as you walk through the space is an artwork. We're going to spend money on something, can it be art? That is the question. That's a painting by George Best that I came across halfway through the show, the footballer George Best, that apparently, supposedly, hard to prove, but I wanted it in the show because of that, because it is impossible to prove that it was by George Best. But it's a good story in there. So that was just in a way to show you some of the usefulness and trying to invent and not anticipate what will happen, trying to set up structures that lead somewhere else. Right. Okay, I'll try and I've got a few more versions of the multiverse to go. The world is understood through production. All meaning comes to us through 5 stages of production. The artist and the engineer can work together to create new meaning through collaborative systems. Fragments of production conditions and half-remembered processes form new ways of making and prototype possible futures. Now, from the artist and the engineer idea, we started to think, how can we embed that? How can we turn that into an exhibition process if we're thinking about this layered? And so we started to imagine a production show. So this has been a trope of titling and thinking from the start. We've made puppet show, curtain show, sculpture show, painting show, Birmingham show, trade show. What else have we made? Quite a lot of the function of art, functions as shows. So production show became a challenge for us to think about. And we started to imagine what are the stages of production? What are the stages of production that we could use? What do artists use? What are the processes that they go through? Do they just research stuff and then make stuff and then show stuff? Is that like one 3-stage way of thinking about what an artist does? Or is it that actually they research stuff and that's the art? Or do they make stuff and that's the art? Or is it all about showing and that's the art? Where is the art? Myself and Ruth Claxton, who's my associate director, and we started thinking about a 5-stage process of production. So you start with pending research and concepting and move on to prototyping, discovering, analysing. But again, we came back to this fact that we thought you can make art at any of those stages, which is not surprising because, as I've already said, if art is the underpinning principle of everything else, it isn't one thing. It can't be put into one box. It doesn't only have one function. Art is all the functions. Then, of course, you can make art which is a prototype. Whereas you probably, if you're trying to make a chair and you make a test and you make a prototype, it's probably still not yet a chair. So it's like a different set of of existing as an object. And art is slippery amongst those different stages and conditions of what. So that's a useful thing to think about and know about, and to think about how we solve problems. So we had the only billboard in Birmingham that wasn't controlled by the advertising corporations, and we can say whatever we want on that because everything that we do on it is an artwork. This is a phrase that from a conversation with Heather and Ivan Morrison that we thought was a way to begin the production process. You just begin, and that's your first stage, and you move through other things. It was actually it's the end of the billboard because we then made an EU billboard, an EU side billboard with Catherine Bum, and we were part of the Remain in the EU campaign, and we were so appalled and angry the day after that we decided to destroy our billboard forever, to cut off our nose. That was the only thing we had to do. So the only billboard that wasn't controlled, we thought, that's it then. We need to do something in our anger. So we destroyed the billboard the next day, took it apart, and stripped it from the facade. And so you do something in anger, and that prompts you to do something else, a next thing. So we just presented the destroyed billboard inside the gallery, and then we started to imagine what else shall we do with the facade of the building. And we'd thought a lot about the facade from the start. So we used this figure that Peter Nencini had made as the first new sign, and we asked Nicholas Deschays, who was one of the artists within Production Show, who was developing heated sculpture, to place one of his heated sculptures on the front of the gallery. So in the winter, we had somewhere where you could warm your hands on the outside of the gallery. So a very simple functional offer instead, replacing the billboard. And then this is one of the stages of exhibition. So we were working on it for 18 months, a number of different stages. And some exhibitions aren't as gorgeous and vibrant as this one looks, and are quite dull and just objects and things going on with information. And then other times we need to push what that means as an exhibition and make the space work for performances. So performances, producing things, elements of public artworks in progress, lots of prototypes and different stages all being brought together, and us working with artists and engineers hand in hand. So it was a very quick summary just to give you that flavour, just because it sets up a little bit this area that I'm working on now and really interested in. So the world is understood through housing. All meaning comes to us through our habitats. We can take control of house building to create our own meaning and form new living systems. Fragments of planning agreements and half-remembered homes form constantly redrawn architectures and social aspirations. So one part of Production Show was that we gained another public art project to be commissioning agents for, to work with Cherwell District Council in Banbury. And Barrett, Bovis and Taylor Wimpey were building 1,200 houses around a country park, which is quite a big, I can't remember the exact number, but it's somewhere around a 10% population increase in Banbury. It's quite a significant thing. But we were given £250,000 to develop public art for that site, so it's not a huge amount. In the Section 106 agreement, that worked out to £150 per house. So when they had worked out what needs doing, we need a school, you need your streets, you need your lighting, we want a surgery, we want a place of worship. All these things go into the 106 agreement. There's this very simple paragraph saying, for every house that's built, £150 goes towards public art. So I don't know where that figure comes from, £150. It's quite an interesting one to look at, to think about how to change that and implement that. How else can that operate? So we're working with 4 artists. We didn't just want to make one big thing, which makes it much harder in a way, but we wanted to work with 4 artists. And Rosalie Schweiker has proposed an artwork where all the production money, which was about £10,000 for her project, is just to be decided what to be spent on by local residents. And so she's setting up a participatory democracy group to decide what else is missing from that estate. And she's in that process now of working through that. This is an early mock-up image by Richard Woods of making a model village across Banbury, which has now turned into making bird houses as a model village, and so he's worked through a number of different scales, but all based on the very stripped down mundane shapes and dimensions of the Bovis and Barrett houses. And then Nicholas Deschays, who made the heated sculpture on the front of the building, is proposing a heated sculpture to go into the landscape. And it's a very abstract form. And so we wanted that to be a useful thing in there as well. That we didn't want everything to be practical and functional, and that you would understand what its use value is. But you can still warm yourself on a cold winter's day walking through the park on this object, but you need to find out what else it's doing. So we argued to the councillors because they thought his sound was too abstract and too unusual and weird, and we said that's why it has to be in. That's why it's useful in this context. And they agreed in the end to let us do that. And the fourth one that I want to talk a little bit about is the artist house. So Heather and Ivan Morrison proposed to make an artist house. The first thing that we did was go to meet with the developers. So thinking about the developers and saying to them, well, what about if we put £50,000 into your design process, you're making the houses anyway, we just meet with your team and we spend our £50,000 on top of your money to make a house. So we make a special house. And then we can think about what are the possibilities of that. And first of all, they said, that sounds fantastic, great, great, great. But of course, what they meant was not on your life. No, no way. So the developers was the first thing that we thought. We thought that would be amazing. And the artists were really excited about working with the teams within the developers. But it doesn't make any sense. It completely contradicts, because the model of the mass volume house industry, and that they are three of the giants of that, is against difference, is against any ability to be modified, is against trying to find better value. It is purely a profit motive, and everything that they do is to control and keep that profit as high as possible, including, of course, as we all know, not building enough houses. So that's this difficult issue that's going on between councils and developers, which is councils seem to only rely on developers as if there's a monopoly and control, an agreement between them, and the more you look into it, the more sinister it becomes. And we are involved, we are implicated, we are commissioned, we have money from that agreement between them to go and do things. This is a proposal by Liam Gillick for an artist house, and this stage it sort of represents us thinking, okay, we can't work with the developers, but in the 106 agreement, there are all the number of houses that they have to make affordable housing, social housing, that is then managed by the Housing Association. So let's speak to the Housing Association. So we went to speak to them, and first of all, they said, that's really interesting. So you spend your £50,000 on top of ours, but we can't have any houses that are different. We can't offer someone a different house than anyone else, because of the pressure of the system means that would look like we're treating somebody differently, and so we'll be in trouble. We can't do that. And things like that, on and on, until it was like, no, it's impossible for you to give us the money to make a different special house. So then we thought, maybe this isn't going to work, but we sort of overlooked the obvious thing, which is to just build a house where there wasn't meant to be a house built in the park as a public artwork. So we went to the planners and said, can we just build a house there? It's a public artwork. And he said, oh, well, yeah, we could give permission for that. You just need to make a house that's interesting and of outstanding architectural merit. And that, of course, we can do that as long as the councillors agree, then we can do that. So it's actually quite an interesting gap in the system. You try and go into the system, you probably can't modify it, you just need to create an alternative to it. With housing, I think that's probably the truth and where we're going to have to work towards. And so this is actually a sketch by Heather and Ivan Morrison of their artist house. They've only got a £50,000 production budget. It's a very tiny budget. But at the moment, we're working towards making an artist house that Eastside Projects will manage for a long term, probably 25 years. And we will be part of a selection process, an open call for artists to live in it at a subsidised rate. The rent will be paid and come back to Eastside Projects so that we can do an open day once a year with the artists, and we can fix up the building for them, and that can support our cultural infrastructure, support Eastside Projects. So what we are proposing, we think, is true social housing. It's a social house that supports the culture that is then supporting other people. We're trying to make a loop that makes us sustainable and that is part of the other system that's out there, and try to find the gaps in between the policies and the ways of commissioning things that support us, but as a not-for-profit business model. So we're really excited about that. We've pitched it to Birmingham City Council as well. So we've made a brief and a document that's gone to Birmingham City Council. We've met with the chief planner and designer for the whole of the city, and he's really interested in it as a demonstrator house. So we started talking to him, and you start realising, can't do self-build house, can't do social housing, can't do affordable housing, because they all mean particular things. And what we're proposing wasn't really that. And there was a moment where he said, you're talking about a demonstrator house. And that this council officer thought, I love that demonstrator house. I hadn't even heard of that as a term before. It's probably just out there. And he proposed it, and now we're going to use that as the title. So it's to demonstrate a different way of living within the city. And this was just a mock-up for them based on a wiki house model, because we got the costings for wiki house, and working with Impact Hub in Birmingham, and Andy Reeve there, who's been doing a lot of research and data analysis, working with architects and looking at sites that councils aren't using. So we're in the process of negotiating with council and looking for other areas of land to try and build artist housing in the city. That's Heather and Ivan Morrison and Richard Wood's altered wiki houses. So all of these, in a way, that again, there's an element of a utopianism about it, but we're trying to be incredibly pragmatic and direct, and look at the nuts and bolts of what is actually happening and work through that as a process and try and present that information in public as well. So the final thing, and I sort of know I've been going for quite a long time, sorry, just this last bit, which is what we're looking at doing next. So the world is understood through policy. All meaning comes to us through political programming. We can take control of policy making to create our own meaning and form alternative social systems. Existing conditions and half-remembered manifestos demand new models of governance and propose possible futures. This was the first thing that we called a policy in Eastside Projects on the day that we opened, September the 25th, 2008, on the very first user's manual. And I didn't even remember, but I was looking at a copy of it and saw that we called it policy statement number 1. And we've proposed to do a policy show as the next show. And I'm working with a curator called Lucy Lopez, who's doing a PhD with me and at Birmingham City University, and we're co-curating the show together now. And she's looking at different ways that artists' organisations and artist-run spaces form publics around them. So Policy Show is part of that process. This statement is taken from one of our reference exhibitions, a 1979 show, a space that ran for just 1 year in New York on Broadway that was called Peter Nadine Gallery. And the first show was called The Work in this Show is a response to the existing conditions and or work previously shown within this space. And it's when we looked at very particular historical models and then say that these are our references, these are where we're taking ideas from. And this is one of the statements that we thought from 1979. In 2008, it still had relevance. In 2017, it still has relevance. It still seems like an approach and a way of thinking as an organisation. So we didn't know what we would do with that and or this, apart from live by it. So this is an artwork by Lawrence Wiener, not in this form, but the words, As Long As It Lasts, is one of the artworks that we had in the gallery in 2008, and we adopt it as a principle in thinking about the short term and long term and all the different elements that we do, as long as it lasts. Better a broken arm than a bruised spirit. So these are quite open, abstract policies to have, but we thought of them as artworks as policies. And now we're re-looking at them and thinking, what does that mean as a policy? And can you make policy as art? How does it operate? We have lived by it, we have worked by it. So we might have much more practical policies, direct policies that will affect how we think and do things. So since 2012, we have had a policy that we show a minimum of 50% women artists and work with minimum 50% women curators. So that's ongoing, and that changes the way that we look and the way that who we talk to and how our program looks. And these sort of changes make a huge difference. So a tiny little alteration in a way, and of course a political statement changes things. So this was just another one that I've pulled out, but we've been doing a lot of other work around artist pay. And we just proposed an alteration to artist pay with Arts Council, but we didn't. We were trying to ask for an uplift so that we could pay artists £7,500 as a fee, because we think that that's what a small space like us should be paying. And so that would mean maybe an artist does 4 projects like that in a year and earns £30,000, so a modest wage. But then it means a bigger space than us should be paying a £15,000 fee, a £20,000 fee. I think it needs to change the way that we pay artists. And the proposals that have come out recently, I think, are underselling what organisations should be working towards. It should be one of the key elements of what happens within any space that is working with artists. And then there's things like this, so very practical, but are also about how we operate as an organisation. There's seven members of staff. When we started, it was me and then 1 part-time person, and so we have 7 now, and would like to have a few more staff, but that still becomes a rule, and that's the last one at the moment. So we have a tea urn was the very first thing that Eastside Projects bought, just for how we were thinking about the space. But we are making a think tank. So the gallery is a think tank, and artists at the core of the think tank, and we're looking at policies, Eastside Projects policies in one stage, a housing policy in the second stage, and then another national or world policy in the third stage that the artists are yet to decide. And that's what we'll be working on from September through into next year as well. And where will Policy Show happen? It may happen where we are, or in our office, or we hope that it will happen in Houses of Parliament, or wherever else we need to go to implement a policy. And then we have to work with the people who can help us to get into those situations, which are already setting up to make that happen. And that's where I think the art should be, that we have to be everywhere in the layers, insinuating and altering and proposing what comes next. Otherwise, that's just what happens every time. Thank you very much.
Do we have any questions for Gavin?
Yes, see, I did too much. I wanted to stop in between each bit and get questions in, but I realised I was talking too much, sorry. Yes, they've all been printed physically, so there's still some of them, there are some copies available. When they first come out, they're free, and then once we get less, then they're for sale, and then until we just haven't got any left. But they're all as PDFs on our website. So there's a section on users manuals, and it's got all 6 PDFs on there. And they're all beautifully made and designed by James Langdon. So, I mean, I didn't really go much into that, but the design is such an integral part of the whole process of what we do as well. But yeah, please check them out, the PDFs. Okay. Yeah, go. Oh, you've got the box. Oh yeah. I think we have not sort of by accident. We have, because what Andy Reeve has done, he's made a map of every unused bit of land in the city centre, and then tried to identify which ones the council own and which ones are privately owned, and how long they've been unused. So then we approached the planning department, looking at some of the unused bits and trying to see if there's a way that they could transfer them to us as a community land trust. Is there a way for us, which hasn't happened in Birmingham? They haven't done one of those, and they're not mad about the ideas. And then what we did was start realising that the council are selling off bits of land. So we went to an auction just to test out and see. There was a very small piece of land, just a garage was on, so you could build one small house on it, and it was list price £5,000. So we thought, well, we'll just go and see. And it was, I mean, that I hadn't been to that sort of auction before, a property auction. It was, you know, heaving and crazy. And it actually, we just set ourselves a limit and said, well, because it's so cheap, we'll just go and we'll just go up to £8,000 because we could fit that into an exhibition budget somehow. It actually sold for £12,000. So we afterwards thinking, oh, that was a bit stupid, we should have just, but you know, you set yourself a rule and then you live by it and you move into the next thing. So it was, yeah, we're just trying now, we're waiting on, some of the bits of land that we wanted are within the range of where HS2 will come in, and so we haven't been able to convince them, even on a temporary basis, that that can happen. So we're still working through that, but it seems that we're probably going to have to buy something somehow.
Within that, and around the structural language very well. Is it sort of going back to what you were saying there about the common land, the common history, so that sort of idea seems to link the sort of ethoses together.
Yeah. I mean, that's one of the things, we're just getting together as a number of organisations to come up with community master plan projects for people, which may or not already be a bit late, because it's the area where we're in, we're trying to work out should we stay there, because it's sort of it's a done deal in terms of regeneration of ownership and possibilities, and although at the heart of everything that gets said about the area and all the government documents and the developers, they all right in the middle of it, it's culture and art. Not a single actual policy which supports any cultural organisation or artists. So it's really, we're caught in it ourselves. We're part of making that area an interesting area and part of the standard thing where art pushes up the value of private property. So we're just looking for those alternatives, and we're not, we don't have money, and we don't have people in our pockets to be able to just make that happen. So we're really trying quite direct citizen routes into it.
Yeah, thanks, Gavin. That was really interesting. I've got I wonder if you talk about, in your manuals, do you talk about selection? It seems that obviously you're quite right that the gallery's not neutral, but it's I think it's still the most kind of obscure area of what goes on in public galleries is actually the process by which artists are chosen, particular artists are chosen to show. Now this is obviously a really important kind of part of the social ecology of art, particularly working in art education, thinking about how people are going to make a living from this stuff. So it's not simply how much someone gets paid. That's really important, and it's hats off to you for doing that. But it's about how that money gets distributed. So I'm just wondering, is it, I mean, such things as, do you have, well, we've the question of selection. How we haven't pinned that down more. We have a policy that affects the number of women in the projects. We have a policy which is about how many artists, the diversity of artists, how many BAME artists our work is at, which is about 30%. We came up with a percentage based on a midpoint between Birmingham and the UK, and also in relation to the number of projects that we do. And so we think that dramatically affects also the selection, the way that, because it's about paying attention and realising when you're not paying attention anywhere else to a particular group or community, or and there's some strengths to the willfulness and chance of the art world, but if it's only that, then I think it becomes too inward-looking and too focused on particular groups of people. And I'm sure that we've been culprits of that in the earlier years of Eastside Projects as well. Then there's some. The ESP program that we made. There's an element within that which is very much about. For me, it was when training as an artist. When I left college, I realised
I didn't know anything about the art world, nothing about the structure at all. But I had self-confidence to just go and make things happen, but only learnt really about the structure of the art world when I decided to curate an exhibition. And then I would go into a gallery in a different way, not as an artist to say, give me a show, but as an artist to say, I would like to meet this artist because I'm curating a show and want to put them into it, and the doors are open. And then you go in and you see all the structure and the system. So when we opened Eastside Projects, I wanted the space to be an open door so that you could come in and you could see the system and witness the different possibilities that happen of how you get selected, how you become part of an ecosystem. And so the ESP program has really looked at that and tried to make that work, that there are direct routes through that process. There are open calls, we do open call shows, do summer camp with ESP members. We've just selected for the Jerwood 3 phase that's going to be announced on Wednesday, the 3 artists. And for that, we have so Jerwood partner with us, and then we've invited Workplace in Gateshead to work with us. And for this, we picked 1 artist from the Midlands, 1 from the North, and 1 from the rest of the UK. And so even that is a selection process which guarantees certain people have to get looked at, and Joe would want to be involved with it, Workplace want to be involved with it, because then you're seeing different groups of artists around the country. So we've done a number of things like that to deal with it, but still there is we haven't gone in more than that to try and refine exactly what that is. We're just saying that it is organic. It is about how do you see things. So I've been modifying who I follow on Twitter. So I use Twitter a lot. And if you look at what's the information that you're getting. So I've got a fixed number. I only follow 444 people. And as I dump people, and I particularly dump white men, then I only replace them with women of colour. And I do that because I just think there's stuff that I don't know, and I want to see what new information I'm going to get, and so I do that as a conscious act to try. And then sometimes I would say, okay, now I want to just look at people who are doing community building and try and find. So it's about looking and being prompted and listening to other people. So if someone complains to us, or is complaining about Birmingham, saying, where's the black artists in Birmingham, or where's the people trying to make studios or whatever, we try and respond and say, oh, you've got a good point, or we're doing this, have you noticed, or come in and meet us. And recently we've had a number of people come in, and then we meet them, and they're actually doing amazing things. So we asked them, could we host an event? Can you come and do something here? And it brings in a totally new audience. So we're just directly trying to look for the weak spots and blind spots that come from our own prejudices and upbringings, and try and take that on and see where it leads. So I think in a way we can come up. It would be interesting to come up with a really particular selection criteria or methodology. I mean, in a way, I probably have one, but it's just a series of instinctive and anticipatory processes that I'm waiting for alarm bells, or not alarm bells, waiting for the sort of good bells to ring when you go, oh, this is interesting, this is good. So, do you want to?
Okay. Did you want to say there's Ben and Slade then? Can we have those 2 more questions maybe?
Thank you. Just a quick one. In terms of the demonstration house, I was just wondering, do you have, so there was a public, it was funding for a public art piece initially, then you devised the project. Is there consultation with the public when you're devising the project? Do you think that's important, or?
No, my findings are that no, it's not.
Oh, really?
Because with the Birmingham Big Art project, then it's a 2 million commission, so that one you have to, we want to test it out and see what a bigger public response is, to get so many. But what we found from that, when you do a big project like that, is that what I hoped, if you get strong artworks in, there's a public who loves each of the proposals. There was 5 proposals. We've shown them for a year. We've had 500,000 people go past the models. We did a public voting system. So you could put in a vote and vote for your favourite, and we monitored that. We got that information out, because just in case there really was an outright winner as a public vote. There wasn't. There was one got like 25%, one got 23%, one got 21%, one got 18, and one got 10%. You know, there was a least favourite, and there was a slightly more favourite, but not enough to make you go, that's why you would choose it. So I also made a selection panel of art experts and Birmingham experts to come together. Only 7 people, small panel, and it was that selection panel which made the proposal then to the steering group. The steering group is made up of, you know, public of Birmingham, but it was set up by them, and it's a very white male business community public of Birmingham. So we then try and make that, so I make a selection panel which is mostly women, and try and diversify and change and modify their behaviour through our actions as well. But in Banbury, then what we found is that people don't know. That's why they're not artists, and that's why they're not curators. They don't know. We should make art, put it out there, and the people respond. The art isn't there to be judged by the people. The art's there to judge the people. It's that way round. We're not doing it and asking your permission to make art. I'm an artist and I'm going to make art. It doesn't matter if you think it's good or not, because that's what an artist does. You're not an artist, so, but if you want to be an artist, you can. Get involved, spend your life dedicated to it, then that's what it is. So that was that's what happened at the start with the Birmingham Big Art Project. Lots of people were going, I want a big pen nib. Birmingham's got a big history of pen nibs, we want a big pen nib. And in this first meeting, before we were signed up to work on the project, I was just asked as an expert to come in. I just said, are you an artist? He's like, no. I said, well, why? Obviously, you can't make an artwork then, can you? You have no idea how to make an artwork. You'd never thought about it before. You just thought you'd chuck that out into the air and that would be great. And that's why you aren't making the artwork. And I could bring in a great artist to make that artwork, because they've spent their whole life thinking about how to respond to context and deal with this. And they asked me to do the job. So I thought, oh, I've really ruled myself out on this one. And they asked us to do the job. So we sort of took them apart and said, you don't know what you're doing. You're conservative, and you're thinking of the wrong things. And they asked us to be the commissioning agents. So that was a public forum in the city, in the council chamber. It was on BBC, and it was like, everything was there. So it was as public as you can get.
Thanks very much for that talk, Gavin. I really enjoyed it. And I wanted to just ask a little bit about your work with Birmingham City University, because we're kind of focusing across the idea about education. Yeah. And I mean, in what ways is there, or are there kind of is there a relationship between Eastside Projects and the work that you do at the university? Have there been effects from that?
There have. I mean, there's some direct and obvious effects that are real big outcomes. Otherwise, it's quite hard to say how that always works. I've been a partner with Birmingham City University from the start. So together with the university, we are the National Portfolio Organisation as a partnership. So it's quite unusual that I created it as an independent company, because I didn't want it to be a university gallery. It needed to have its own voice, but I wanted it to strategically connect into what the university is. And we try and say, well, as an art and design university, you should be leading principles of art and design in the city. If you make a building, that building should be a pinnacle of art and design. Why else would you make a building as an art and design institution? But I haven't been able to get them to do that yet. So that's quite tricky, where it's about the power structures within the university. But then, so Ruth Claxton, my associate director, she wanted to make a new Birmingham production space, because she thought, I can't make massive sculptures here in Birmingham. I need somewhere. So she thought of it from quite a selfish position, like up close, what do I need? What will make it better for me as an artist? I want a big production space. What about if we had a national production space in Birmingham, and it would attract other people to come to it? So we pitched that to Birmingham City Council, and we pitched it to Birmingham City University, and pitched it to the LEP, the Enterprise Partnership, and everyone thought, that's good. We understand what that is. That means jobs and money and buildings and coming through. And then the university developed the idea of the Steam House and wanted to make a bigger version of that was a bigger innovation centre and maker place, and at the heart of it, the Birmingham production space. So we first got the $500,000 from Arts Council for a first stage version of that, and then the university have raised ERDF money on top of that. So it's like, I don't know, 2 million as a prototype space. But then in George Osborne's last budget, then he gave 14 million for the big steam house that the production space is part of. So that came from us within the university, and has become the lead university project for them to think about what they are in the future. So it's quite a funny one, whereas we don't, then there's some bits that I think we need to embed ourselves more. So we're connected into the research culture and have a PhD student, and we meet with students and they work on some of the projects. They go out to Banbury and meet the artists and work on things that, so it affects people in some dramatic ways, but perhaps not in a consistent way, not in a, like everyone doesn't get access. It's open. So we do talk events and things within our spaces and make that happen. But I think we can do more, but the issue that we come up to is our capacity. So the things that work really well is when, say we work really well with the architecture department in Birmingham City University, because they're really organised, they set everything up and they've worked out how to use us. So this is the best thing. That's why we make the manuals. Let's show how to use us. So they set up a project, they get things, and they come in and do short things with us that feed into bigger projects and that connect with the themes that we're working on, so around housing and production processes, and they get the best out of us, because we don't have to organise it all, because we don't have the capacity to organise it. But so that's why we try and do. But actually, it seems it's easier for us to work with the conservatoire and musicians and architects than artists. Because the artists come in with a position of like, well, how do I get a show here? And I'm thinking, that's not your first question. The musicians come in and say, wow, can we bring these people in and make? Can we make some music around the exhibition? And I just thought, I'll try it out, and it always works. And the architects come in and say, what else can we do to think about your facade of the building or something? They look for the useful elements. An artist comes in and they don't. The students don't often think about what's the useful thing that I can do. They think back, and it's like, well, yes, come in, and then I'm going to tell you, you haven't got a show, you're not going to get a show, I'm never going to give you a show, unless someone else tells me about you. How are you going to do that? So you're thinking this is it, that's the wrong conversation, you've already got it wrong. You've got to think about this other route to get into my ear or in front of my eyes, or I tell them just go on Twitter. They just do something interesting on Twitter and I notice it, then that's it. or delete it. But it's
Oh yeah, sure. Thanks very much. That was great. I just got I just wanted to note, because a lot of what you've been talking about, I think, is about usefulness and use value, which I know there's a big discussion about that at the moment. It's something I'm looking at. But also how that relates to your autonomy. So like, as I suppose Eastside Projects, how that kind of gives you power, or because obviously it's problematic as well with all the organisations you're working with as well. So I just felt like sort of, putting it out there, saying use value, autonomy.
Yeah, you're saying use value.
Yeah, use or use. Yeah, use. Yeah. There's a lot of talk about use, but you've mentioned usefulness a lot.
Yeah,
but you want to be useful, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
But it's that the unquantifiable and the thing that you can't fully understand is also really useful.
Yeah.
That's why we should. So to get to the useful things, we have to have the space to just do stuff and let things happen, and not always know what the results are going to be. That's why science comes from art in the same way.
Yeah.
So you just do stuff and wait until you find a thing that fits with something
and
else.
I suppose because you're in that slightly distant position, you can do that. You know what I mean? Because although you're kind of connected, you're actually kind of outside of this, in a way, in the structure. I mean, let's not be naive about it, but also slightly kind of outside of it as well. Yeah.
Yeah, well, I think we're in an interesting position.
Yeah.
We have to make more use out of the potential that's there as well. So we try.
Good. Gavin,
Great.
thank you very much.
That's right, a real pleasure. Yeah, thank you. Cheers.